Hello and welcome to GC Conversations. We're here at NBC Studios and Charter Cable, or if you're on the World Wide Web, wherever you're joining us at today, thanks for being here, where we talk all things Georgia College, faculty, staff, and our community members, friends, and alumni. Today we're joined by a little bit of all of those, the Executive Director of the Millersville-Baldwin County Development Authority, long title there, Angie, Angie Ghesling. So, and Angie, let me start the program off by saying, for you and I to wrap something up in 30 minutes is impossible.
Yes.
Okay? But we're going to try to do it today, and but thanks for coming here today and talk a little economic development and talk about Angie and your Georgia College experience, which is actually what I want to first lead into. So,
Good.
You're a Georgia College graduate.
I am.
You're also a Millersville native.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. How'd you get to Georgia College, and talk about your experience here?
Well, I grew up in Milledgeville. My dad was director of the recreation department for 15 years, and so we were immersed in this community.
Okay.
If we ever wanted to visit with my dad, and from your experience with athletics, I'm sure you understand that the children and the spouse go to you.
You had to find him at the ball field.
Yes, we did. And so we knew a lot of people, fortunately, from doing that, and I became accustomed to being surrounded by a lot of people. And I was accepted to the University of Georgia. I was going off there actually to cheer.
Okay.
And I had two other siblings, and my dad was a county employee, my mother was a state employee, and it was, oops, she got in, and how are we going to pay for it? My dad had done fish fries for people for many years, and so he'd always been encouraged to open a restaurant. So he saw it as an opportunity to do that and supplement their income, and we were open 3 nights a week. And that later turned into a 23-year venture and almost put both of my girls through college.
Okay.
Chobe's Landing.
Okay.
And so when I came back to Milledgeville after being in Athens and had a family, I became usually non-traditional students are usually, older and they're going back to school, but I was, very young 20s and going back to school. And fortunately, we had Peabody here at Georgia College at the time, so my girls would go over to Peabody while I was in class. So I actually finished up my degree and went on to work on my MPA while I was here, and just loved it. It's very rare, the situation I was in the early 80s with college, because most of us did stay here for school. And I was one of 4 students at the University of Georgia from Milledgeville at the time. And of course, that's a very different situation now. So, but my experience here in school was definitely very rewarding. And so during that time, I was also running Chobe's and going to Georgia College. Okay.
You had quite the busy schedule.
I did, but I work well that way. Don't give me any idle time. So it was much better to be busy and be immersed in things.
Well, the restaurant, which kind of leads into to economic development, or the experience with the restaurant, I'm certainly just dealing with people all the time. Tell me about that training, and I'm sure that your own children were involved in that as well. And they develop a lot of interpersonal communication skills, that type of thing.
Exactly. My children don't meet a stranger, and I'm really sure that it's a result of that experience, because just like with my dad, if they wanted to see me, they came to the restaurant. But I was very fortunate because we were only open for dinner. And once my girls became of school age, then I had idle time during the day once I finished up at Georgia College, and I started volunteering. And I would do a stint with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and serve as a volunteer and on their board, and then once that term was up, I'd go over and work for the Chamber of Commerce and with the Development Authority. So I was cultivating that type of knowledge and skills that led later to a career in economic development without knowing it. I believe in volunteerism, and that's why that I did that, but I never realized that it actually was preparing me for a career that I'm now involved in.
And we're going to talk a lot about economic development here today. Let's first talk about, give me a 30,000 foot view of economic development. And we just talked about this off the air. It's changed.
Yes.
The world's changed with this economy of about 3 years ago. Everything's changed. But give me a broad spectrum of what is economic development.
Well, if you're in my job, and we do this to each other a lot, this exercise of what is it now, because we are adding to, we're never taking away from that definition. And it's in essence, it's bringing wealth into a community, into a state, and then I always add the caveat to create quality jobs. not just the creation of jobs, but you want to bring quality jobs into a community for the people that live there. But economic development, if you look even at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, that was one case where I got to see how it just continued to grow. Tourism is a huge component of economic development outside of the traditional recruitment of manufacturers to the state. The film division is big business for us, and hopefully you'll have a conversation with Jane Soule. Last week she had 3 calls looking for different movie sets in Milledgeville, so that's also a huge economic driver for communities. So it's there again, there are a few things that you can really rule out. They're not economic development. And that's why you'll see me involved in so many things. Sometimes I kind of get a look like, well, why did Angie have to come to this meeting today? But honestly, it all plays in. Literacy is huge, education. I mean, you can just imagine how all of this has such an effect on what I'm able to do to recruit a company to come here.
You know, it's funny you talk about, when you said that about film industry, we've just got a picturesque community, period, with our downtown, our college right here, so and every time I see someone driving one of those on a trolley, I think those are people that are here eating in our restaurants, buying gas in our community, staying in our hotels. So it is a wide spectrum. I'm glad you talked about that. We're going to come back and talk a little more economic development. We're up against a break, so we'll be right back with Angie Ghesling. I'm Wendell Staten here at GC Conversations.
Why do people think there's more disagreement in the state legislature than in most families? My brother and I argue about everything, even which TV show to watch. Mom says our elected officials debate important issues every day, and they may argue too, but in the end they compromise, and that's how the best decisions are made. Sometimes it just takes a little give and take to find common ground. I guess it's the same in the State House as it is in my house. It's okay to argue, as long as you're willing to compromise. You know, like when you want to see the Jonas Brothers, but your brother wants to watch SportsCenter. And you end up compromising and watch the new PBS special with your parents. Am I missing something?
Learn more about how compromise works by logging on to www.representativedemocracy.org.
Over half the people waiting for an organ transplant in the United States will die before they get one. You can increase your chances of getting a life-saving organ donation by joining LifeSharers. You get preferred access to the organs of other members. In return, you give fellow members first access to your organs. Membership is free and anyone can join. Join LifeSharers now. It's free, and it could save your life.
Hey, welcome back to GC Conversations. I'm Wendell Staten along with Angie Ghesling. Angie, we left off talking about economic development, and let's talk a little bit about how it's changed, certainly over the last decade, the last 15 to 20 years for sure, because manufacturing as a general thumb in the country has changed. So your role is a little bit different now, but talk about those changes over the last decade. You've been in this business a long time. Talk about that.
My experience started with the State Department of Economic Development, and the rule of thumb is we work with manufacturers. That has changed over the last 15 years, but it has especially changed just since I've come back into my role with the Development Authority here over the past 6 years. And it has taken a lot of us some time actually to really absorb what that means for us. For instance, when I came back, one of the first things I was approached with was a project to bring a private prison into Baldwin County. I assisted, I gave information, but actually this involved into a very competitive project that we had to get very involved with. So this company was able to make their proposal work to build a prison here. It was competitive against other companies who were going to build in other areas of the state. Of course, we started out and we had other prisons open in this community. So this was actually an addition, and in the end, it's turned out being a huge economic driver for us. It's an $80 million investment. They'll infuse in payroll and whatnot, $20 million back into the community, hiring 300 people. The other project I was approached with was our Kroger, which of course will be one of the largest, or is right at this point, the largest footprint for Kroger in the state. Again, I thought this is not a project that I really need to be involved in. I didn't really even see that the community needed to get that involved in. We have become very involved in the International Council of Shopping Center organization. So I knew then that the way that a manufacturer looks to a community and the way that a retailer looks to a community are quite different. The retailer knows exactly where they need to locate. In this case, to the actual spot. We couldn't even shift them across the road with Kroger on this project. But as it turned out, they were in a competitive situation. There were projects lined up for Kroger Southeast, and ours was coming in way over bid. So actually, not only would it have turned out that we would have lost the big Kroger, but they would have closed the small Kroger as well. The Kroger here in the footprint has never worked for them. And so in this process, we actually worked through some grant applications for Kroger to get some of the, you can't actually put the money into the facility, but there's a lot of road work that is very evident to people now, and a red light will go in. And those are places that you can assist with state funds. However, we were denied the first time that we went in with an application for Kroger because they were comparing it, or thought they were comparing it to manufacturing jobs. I was able to go back and do an exercise, consult with our local industry, and as it turns out, Kroger was offering starting salaries at what my industry were offering. But not only that, their benefits in some cases were even better, even for part-time employees. So it was an aha moment for my friends at the state, and also for me to really look and say, and to contemplate, what is a quality job? These are great jobs that are coming. And again, if our economy had not shifted, I don't know that these projects would have turned out quite like they did, but I think it's been a positive thing for all of us to embrace companies of all types that want to come in and bring jobs to this community.
Well, certainly we've just celebrated recently the TJ Maxx grand opening, which brings more jobs. We've Triumph, we know, is expanding. We've got Wrath. We've got a lot of different things going on. As you look at that, so it's not just Angie Ghesling. I want to talk about this. There's a team involved. And so if I'm a new business or think about locating here, then I'm looking at I want to know about the climate. I want to know about the workforce. I want to know about the natural resources we have. All of and we've got all that. We've got the education component. We've got parks and recreation. We've got it all. So if I'm a business out there and I'm thinking about locating, let's say my footprint is the South. What are some things that Millersville offers, in your opinion?
Well, I'll back up for a minute and say this. If you're working like I am, and we're a 1.5 person operation at the Development Authority, no, you definitely aren't working alone. But in working with the state, on the state level, like I did for so many years, we often had a conversation among my colleagues about the challenges of being that local economic developer and how there are so few communities that we came into contact with where we feel like we could be a success or a part of things. And this is one of those communities. You'll find that in this business, like most every other, relationships are what make the deal happen. And so I'm really fortunate that if a company, the challenge really is to get them here. The elimination process can start on the web, and we may never know we've even been eliminated. And there are some projects we'll never qualify for that absolutely require an interstate. But the things that we do have, to have an industrial park that is fully developed, to have a diversified manufacturing base is very important to know, because sometimes the final step in the process is that a prospect will want to speak to one of your plant managers. It's already been there for a number of years. To know that I can call Merlin Fechner, well, I wouldn't even have to pick for them. I can guarantee you that any of our plant managers would sit down with that person and give glowing comments about how the community continues to embrace them. I'm a big proponent of existing industry. That's where my heart lies. That's where I know our success is. 80% of jobs in this country are going to come from an existing
Right.
industry. So what we have now, we've had disappointments with Ream leaving and Shaw closing, but every one of our existing manufacturers are in some mode of expansion.
Right.
And many of them have looked to the community, and we have participated in helping them to become more competitive and to add on an extra line or more production. You know, talking about how diversified our most recent announcement came from a distilling company.
Right.
Georgia Distilling is opening here. And if you talk to them now, to the owners, Sean Hall and Bill Malden, they are so sold on this community. Right. And in my job, as you and I have talked about, we met pretty quickly after you moved here, and you told me right then, Angie, if you ever need me with a prospect, I'll be there. You and people like Bill and Sean are the biggest selling points for this community. And what people need to realize too is that you don't know who a person will come into contact when they're visiting our community.
Right.
So we've really all got to have our best face on and think positively and be positive. But again, the elimination process is very cumbersome, and we can be cut, but I am always so confident that if I can get a prospect on the ground here, it's sold.
Well, I'm glad you said that. It's just like our students here at Georgia College. We feel like if we get them to visit, then we've got them. And I feel the same way. When we visited here as a family thinking of moving here, we were sold by the people that were here. And I know it's the same thing because the folks who are here want to make this place the best it can be.
Exactly.
So we're going to come back and we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit about India when we come back. So
good.
We'll be right back here on GC Conversations.
A lot of people say government is too messy. Half the people say something's a good idea, and the other half say, well, it's a bad idea. All we hear about is a disagreement, the bickering, the compromises, which can leave a bad taste in our mouths. No wonder so many people are cynical, thinking that nothing good can get done. Actually, messy can be good, like my ice cream sundae. Let's think of our democracy that way. You've got all these different choices, lots of flavors blending together. Then, the only thing you have to worry about is that it gets a little sticky. Am I missing something?
Learn about what you can do to make American democracy stronger by logging on to www.representativedemocracy.org.
Travel advisories to small business loans, retirement savings to Medicare coverage, ID theft protection to contacting elected officials, student loans to taxes online. Whether you have information to get or ideas to give, USA.gov is the official place to connect with your government. From surplus car auctions to finding a new job, our new mobile apps will keep you updated on the go. So, from marriage records to passport applications, veterans benefits to birth certificates, patent applications to energy-saving ideas, product recalls to home buying tips. Check out USA.gov because the country runs better when we stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to GC Conversations. I'm Wendell Staten along with Angie Ghesling. And for our last segment here, Angie, we're going to talk about India, okay? And what I call the India Project, and I know it's a partnership that's developed between the university and you and the economic end of it and the town and all a lot of folks involved with this.
Right.
But I'm just going to kind of throw it out there and tell me about the India Project.
Well, as we talked about, the economic development process has really changed, and the way that we recruit companies is very different, and India is a great example of that. I was approached probably a year and a half ago by then President Dorothy Leland, and she was already planning to take a group over. Our provost, Sandra Jordan, and Dr. Matthew Lailtroth, our dean of the business school, were already planning to go on a mission to recruit for the university. While meeting with the consultant, Dorothy said to him, you know, if we're taking all this time to go over there and spending all this energy to speak with people, is there an economic development component that you could add? Because we could take our economic developer, and at the time we had hoped to take the mayor as well, over there to recruit companies. Well, she put him to the test, and I did too, because I knew for us to take on something of this magnitude, we needed some assurances that there were people there that were ready to receive us.
Right.
So you fast forward a year or so, and the consultant came back with 20 qualified leads for us. You know, India is the largest democracy in the world, so it's become really a logical link. The state of Georgia is spending a lot of time and effort over in India. In fact, we crossed paths in the airport or in the hotel there as we were leaving. But what it caused us to realize, and of course, I know being an alum of Georgia College, I'm the first one to come here and look for resources and partnerships. So there have been several cases where I have partnered, but it really caused us to look closely at what is this university offering that will directly benefit a prospect, and let's put it in a package.
Right.
And that's what we did. So that's probably one of the best products that we put together, was to show how this university, and I think we were all surprised at what that looked like once we got it on paper and got a PowerPoint together. It was interesting once we got there. We had a male consultant that went with us. Protocol over there is very much what you hear. So Ani was always the first one to speak in our meetings. Our president was the second one to speak, and then the person going with the message turned out to be the third.
Okay.
So what happened 2 visits in is that between Ani and Dorothy, they had given my whole message.
Okay.
They were so good at it, and so I had to get really creative each time that we went in to meet with companies. But the eye-opener for me on this trip was we took one journey in a car, and over there I never saw lanes painted on the road, number one. And we were going about 5 deep in traffic, and we were in what I think would be the slow lane. They have bumpers on their trucks that say, "Blow the horn, please." Okay. And there's such tiny spaces to pass, they need to know if you're coming around them. So there are horns blowing, and working with Keep Milledgeville Beautiful, I was amused because they had a lot of signs up about stop noise pollution, don't blow your horn unless you need to, that kind of thing. So the whole thing was very chaotic, motorcycles weaving in and out, and so finally I just closed my eyes in traffic, and when I did open up to see how far we'd actually moved, which was not very far, I looked over and there's a guy on an elephant, and he was really beating all of us in his lane of traffic. So there were several amusing things, along the way that did happen like that. But what I did discover as far as my recruitment tactic was, for here it's very difficult when I'm working with companies that are familiar with the U.S., and Atlanta is always one of my selling points along with Savannah. But to tell someone that you've got a minimum of a 90-minute drive to the airport, 2.5 to the port, that's big time for companies normally. But what I realized in traffic is, hey, this is a walk in the park to get them from Milledgeville to Atlanta. And then, of course, the companies in India who have looked to Atlanta to locate, there's not that much land available. So if you like Atlanta, here I am right down the road with as much land as you could possibly need. So it became a great advantage to me in selling our community that I don't normally have. The other thing that caught me and felt really quite good once we got into the company is we experienced a lot of what I felt like was Southern hospitality. We're very much akin in that respect, where you could tell that we all wanted everyone to be comfortable in a meeting. We both have a hard time saying no. That became obvious after a while, so you were hoping at the end of your business meeting that you were all in agreement, but you had to really look for the signs to make sure that we all were. We've had a follow-up visit since then from a company that also has a university in India, and they've signed an MOU, which the provost and the president all were a part of. The other thing that happened that I did not anticipate when we were there, I went on 3 of the signings that the university had in India with other colleges, and there was formal ceremonies, there was a meal served always. Most universities in India are owned by corporations. So even though I was there, with the university with one of their meetings, I was also making contact with businesses.
Right.
So I came home, I think I have about 86 business cards that I came home with. And we met several ministers for industry of different sizes. And in this process, what people do have to understand is that it takes a long time.
Right.
I know for us who live here, this is a great community, and why wouldn't you want to locate here? But Kroger took 2.5 years, the prison took 2.5 years, and this latest announcement of 300 jobs at Triumph took 2.5 years to put together.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if we're all right here together working on something, and it takes that much time. So for us to have already had a follow-up visit from someone in India, I think is a very positive sign for us.
Yeah, like you say, a world away is probably going to take a little bit longer, but it's very interesting observation about the traffic patterns there and how even here we're close to a port city. 3 hours is not a big deal for them, right?
No, not at all. And to know that you could go a minimum of 55 miles an hour the whole way just sounds like heaven. So yeah.
And the other thing is the amount of land we have here. I'm sure the land is not as plentiful there.
Well, the land is plentiful. However, it's not developed.
Right.
So of course their challenge there, and we went to several cities north to south over those 11 days, and there was no city that was not under some type of infrastructure construction, whether it be roads or water or power. So that is their dilemma. There are so many people who really are pulling into some confined spaces and taxing their system. But you go out in the rural areas and you're not, where there is so much land, but you're not going to find the water and sewer and necessary things. Where they really have us, of course, as everyone hears, is with the labor cost.
Right. Sure.
And so we went to visit a rural data processing center. While we were there, the people working there were all in their young 20s. Right. What they were making there, they were able to feed they referenced a family of 7 that they were able to feed just through that one job that they had at, I think, making maybe $15 a week would be our equivalent. So you can see there's a challenge there, but there are also opportunities. They have a market here. And we met the CEO of one of their largest manufacturers who does have a presence in Atlanta, and of course, and he requires 100 acres at a minimum. So, as he looks to expand, then we've got Milledgeville out there as an option for him now.
Well, we're up against our last break, and that's it. So thank you for joining us today. I love the fact that we depend, not only do we depend on each other as university and economic development, but we work together for that.
Absolutely. So, I appreciate the partnership.
Angie, thanks for joining us. That's it for GC Conversations today. I'm Wendell Staten, and we'll see you next time.